No, no.
But you know what I mean?
I have a collection of words that you shouldn't use if you want me to understand them, and they're all in Charles' piece. So many big words. Do you not have people from the University of Alabama reading your pieces?
I'm sure the people at the University of Alabama can understand my pieces.
They certainly can. I'm just checking. So Charles, explain to me your biggest concern about universal background checks that Toomey and that Toomey's in the past.
Well,
to debate.
All of the debate and the conversation this morning, yesterday, on this show and elsewhere has been about politics. Can we get these senators to do this? And I think everyone should step back. You know, in enlightened democratic societies, it's incumbent upon the people who suggest changes to explain why. You don't do what the president has done from the beginning, which is to say, here is a problem. I think that we need to do something to fix it, not quite make the case. Kathleen Parker, hardly a right-wing extremist, said everybody knows that this bill would have done nothing to have stopped Newtown, for example, and yet it's always hung on Newtown. So the first thing to say is doing something is not a good idea in and of itself. The reason it worries me specifically is not because it's the end of the world, but because where does it end? I mean, really, this bill, right from the beginning down to how it's been whittled down, is what the president's wanted to do all along. And so it's not really...
I mean, is this the slippery slope argument that we hear all the time?
It is a slippery slope argument in that, you know, today's exemptions become tomorrow's loopholes. I mean, what will stop somebody standing up tomorrow and saying, well, yeah, I know those were sensible exemptions at the time, but if we could just close off private sales, if we could just close off, you know, fathers giving their guns to their neighbors or to their sons, then the system would work. But it can't work while we have these loopholes. We need to close them.
Well, the sad part of this is that the things that I think that would work most directly, and in fact were once part of federal law, involve assault weapons, so-called assault weapons. I don't think you need to say so-called. I mean, they are. These are not things for hunting and so forth. And the big magazine clips. Those would putting those kinds of limits on, which is consistent with what the federal government has done with other weapons of battle, would be fine. But that's off the table. So all the concerns are about the supposed invasions of privacy from creations of lists and so forth and so on.
Well, Howard, you say so-called assault weapons, and that's exactly the phrase you should use, because there's no such thing as an assault weapon, and I think people who watch this show and people who have come on this show, yesterday Joe Biden came on, he said, you know, the NRA spreads misinformation. One of the reasons that the left loses on gun control is because they spend a lot of time mocking and demagoguing and not much time learning about guns and the gun issues. There's no such thing as an assault weapon. There never has been. It's a rifle which has a cosmetic casing. And when the assault...
Well, I mean, they're assault weapons. They've been banned.
It's a made-up term.
But the assault weapons as defined by the government have been banned since the 30s.
No. You see, this is exactly
they got grandfathered in.
Wrong.
But in '86.
Joe, I'm sorry, that's just factually wrong. You're confusing assault weapon, which was a made-up term in the 90s, and there were certain semi-automatic weapons that were put into that, with automatic weapon, which is a gun that fires continuously, which has been banned from the 30s or very heavily regulated.
But the distinction between continuous and non-continuous has disappeared. And when you have a weapon that can fire 100 rounds within, you know, a minute or so, there's no unless you're going to argue that people need those kinds of weapons in order to protect themselves against criminals who have the same kind of weapon, then there's no reason to have those. Now, maybe that's your argument.
But you can fire 100 rounds from a handgun if you put a big enough magazine in it. These are meaningless distinctions.
Well, that's the point. The big enough magazine.
One reason why one limits the size of magazines.
I know how the NRA.
Listen, that would be the case for magazines, but not for assault weapons.
I know how the NRA works. David Keene, who's now their sort of behind-the-scenes mastermind, is a guy I've known for 30 years. What the NRA does is turn those type of weapons into, quote, sport weapons. They teach people to use them. They use them in shooting. They use them in sporting events. And then there's a federal case, the Heller case, which says if a weapon is widely used for recreational purposes, then you can't limit it. So a lot of the sports programs that they run are designed to legitimize those weapons.
So we're up against a couple of hard breaks here. I want to talk to Charles very quickly. We need to bring Chuck back in. But Charles, it seems to me, though. I mean, just we hear a lot of semantics arguments. So we're right now arguing over the definition of assault weapons. You say there's no such thing as an assault weapon.
Right.
I can tell you the NRA since 1994 has been saying the same exact thing that I'm saying today. Now you're saying, well, no, Joe, you're wrong. It's the definition's changed. If you don't call it an assault weapon, then they say, hold on, you're coming after our pistols. They just walk around in circles. If you talk about background checks, then they go, well, you know, it's not about background checks. If it starts there, then it's going to be a gun registry. It's like all these people that have been saying, we need to be in Afghanistan. Why? Well, because of Pakistan. Why can't we just talk about background checks? Why is there always a slippery slope?
Well, because when you look at the facts of the gun control debate, the gun control measures that have been proposed or have been tried, you're right, between 94 and 2004 there was an assault weapons ban, haven't worked. You know, the DOJ itself said that the assault weapons ban didn't work. The University of Pennsylvania's study said that it didn't work. Background checks equally.
Yeah. Let's focus on
background checks. James Holmes, Seung Hee Cho, the Virginia Tech perpetrator, passed a background check. You know, Adam Lanza
a flawed background.
Well, okay, but well, then you're on NRA territory, and you say fix the background checks.
I would like to fix them too.
But who wouldn't? I mean, who wouldn't like to do them? Who wouldn't like to make tougher penalties for people who violate?
Well, you would agree with me, Charles, that over the past 10 years, a lot of these laws haven't been enforced because a lot of people in Congress don't want the ATF to enforce the laws. We don't even have a person in charge of the ATF right now.
Well, that's an appointments issue, yeah. But no, I mean,
It's a political issue.
Wait a
That's
minute.
political issue.
That's not. Wait, Joe. The NRA has made. They redefined ATF. ATF became a Senate confirmation appointment so that it would never get confirmed. They score the vote. The confirmation of an ATF head gets scored. That's why there's always an acting one. So, you know, you can't just brush off this ATF issue. This ATF issue has been basically at the center of trying to make sure that there isn't somebody with real authority in charge of ATF.
So listen, let's do this, because Charles is outnumbered like 4-1 right now, which is actually, in this one case, proportionally in line with Americans who support background checks. But let's do this. I don't know if we can keep you here and continue the debate, but also we want to make sure on maybe Monday or Tuesday we can get you in, a couple other people, and talk about this and talk about it for 30, 45 minutes, because we really need to dig in a lot deeper.
I agree.
And you just may be surprised. I may agree with you on about 95% of the issues. So, Chuck, thanks so much.
See you, buddy.
What do you have going on in the Daily Rundown?
We have more of our new NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Interesting look at the values cut, sort of where one part of the country's headed, Republicans headed in a different way. It's fascinating, and it may explain some of the cultural disconnect that's taking place in the U.S. Senate.
All right, Howard, thank you, so much for being here. What are you working on right now?
We're working on gun control at the Huffington Post and immigration, which is the next thing up.
All right. Fantastic. And thank you. We're going to get you back, Charles. Greatly appreciate it.
Anytime.
You brought the scarf. We got to have you back. We got to have you back. We'll bring the scarf back, and we'll have you back every day. Mark Morial coming up next.
Morning Joe is brought to you by DirecTV. Switch now and get a whole home DVR upgrade for free.
It looks good, except for all those wires.
I know. They look worse than...
And finding a place for that clunky cable box, that's worse than...
Totally. We need to upgrade to DirecTV and get the new Genie. With the Genie, you don't have to see wires or boxes in every room.
Really?
Yep. DirecTV's more amazing than...